Has to work quickly. Down to 6 seconds. Carr going down again. And it's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
For the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone. Touchdown. The punter to beat, and the punter brings him down. Raiden man saved a touchdown most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.
And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael on the line today to help us preview what will be the biggest night in all of football for the New York Jets, the NFL draft, which is later tonight. PJ Clerk, who's a great friend of the show. He's a great friend of mine. He is the host of the Boomer Bust podcast. He's a draft nerd. He's an expert. He's awesome. I'm very grateful to have him on the show. PJ, thank you so much for spending. It's a Wednesday night when we're recording this, but people are going to be listening to us Thursday morning, the morning of the draft. How are you feeling less than 24 hours away from the biggest night of I guess, your podcast and what you guys do?
Yeah, definitely a big night for us. I am excited as it stands right now at 5:15 on Wednesday night. We still have plenty of work to do. We're going to be live on our YouTube for all 3 days, and we're just trying to work out graphics and stuff. And we are still trying to finalize everything to be ready for tomorrow night. But I am excited. I am excited certainly for the future of the New York Jets. And thank you guys for having me on. I always appreciate it. Always a good time.
Well, yeah, you were telling us before we started recording that you haven't been able to just talk Jets in a long time. So I'm glad you get the outlet because it's a big night for the Jets tomorrow. I mean, obviously, people pretty much know what the Jets are going to do too, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But 23 is probably the most – I have no idea what's going to happen at 23. And in most years in the NFL draft, and this is probably just a symptom of the Jets always picking so high, you have a pretty good sense of what they'll do. 23, it's like, they could take an edge. They could take an offensive lineman. They could take a corner. Hell, I could see a receiver. I mean, you just don't know anything. So that pick is very much intriguing, and obviously the rest of the draft. So let's talk about Zack Wilson, though, because that's why everybody's here. He will most likely, I would say with 99% certainty, be announced as the next Jets quarterback later.
I would even almost say 100% with probably what John Beck said a couple days ago.
I guess that's true. I feel like we know.
Okay. With 100% certainty, Zack Wilson's going to be the guy. What are your thoughts on Zack and your evaluation? We had you on, I think it was back in October.
Yeah. So actually, the last time I was here was Boise State game, which was like Zach's coming out party. This was like the beginning of the Zack Wilson hype. And I was talking about Justin Fields in the what if the Jets actually win a game hypothetical, which obviously happened. And the first guy I mentioned, I said, before we even get to Justin Fields, I said, we cannot rule out Zack Wilson. I hope everybody watched the game on Friday. And here we are now, 24 hours in advance. Zack Wilson's going to be a New York Jet. So the evaluation, I mean, it is what it is. So the obvious negatives are the 1 year of elite production, injuries in 2019, banged up. And then it's just level of competition. Everybody wants to get on his stats versus ranked teams, and the Coastal game. Nobody wants to draft a kid that lost Coastal Carolina. Never mind that they took that game on 3 days in advance and Coastal had against, and he didn't even play poorly in that game, really. So here's with Zack Wilson, the potential is through the moon. Like the off-platform throws, the quick release, the powerful release, the quick trigger. He knows what he's doing. He's a smart kid. It's just there is a higher degree of risk, I think, than maybe with a Justin Fields. But to me, the ceiling is higher, and that's what I think Joe Douglas sees.
I'm curious to ask you, do you think, because we've gotten to this point now where Wilson's the obvious number 2 and Fields might even, slip outside the top 5, maybe not even in that conversation for the Niners. So how do you see Fields versus Wilson? If you were making the pick for the Jets, would it be more of a toss-up for you?
Yeah, it would be way more of a toss-up. Obviously, at this point, when you know who the number 1 pick is, you're not competing against anybody else. Like, you have your pick of the rest of the litter. So you would like to have a decision made. But I have them 2 and 3. I have them with the same grade on the board. It's really just the way I kind of describe this to everybody is Justin Fields is going to come in and he's going to be a good quarterback immediately. And I said this, especially if he went to San Francisco, and no matter who San Francisco takes, I think Jet fans need to be aware that San Francisco is probably making the playoffs next year. Like, they are a good team. Whoever they draft is going to do enough with Kyle and is going to be better than Zack Wilson next year. Almost a guarantee. We cannot lose our minds when the guy we passed on goes to the playoffs next year with San Francisco and burns the world down because he has the best coach in the league. Like, we can't do that. You got to see the course. You got to stay with Zack Wilson, and you got to just ride this out for whatever it's going to be worth. So Fields is going to come in wherever he ends up and immediately contribute and immediately be a plus. Whereas I think Wilson's learning curve is going to be a little bit steeper. I don't think Fields is a bust. I don't think Fields really has that much bust potential. Maybe he doesn't see the top 10 quarterback ceiling, much like a Deshaun Watson saw it pretty early in his career. Maybe he's just, league average, but he's hanging around and he gets starts throughout his career. Whereas Zack Wilson, I think this is like, not to, use the phrase, but I think this is boom or bust. Like you are taking the swing. And Zack Wilson, we could be in a Sam Darnold situation 3 years from now. He might just not be any good. That could happen. Whereas I don't think Fields has that bottom out potential, but the ceiling for Wilson is a lot higher.
Yeah. Are you confident he's as special as some people claim? I mean, Dan Orlovsky was saying that he's going to be the most talented quarterback the Jets have ever drafted. And I'll be honest, I think right at the beginning of the draft process, and even for the first month or two, I don't know about Michael. I think he was kind of on the fence, but I was probably more of a Fields guy. I mean, we had a whole podcast and I called Zack Wilson a baby-faced elf. And, I think it's hard because I really, really like Justin Fields. And I think that he checks a lot of the boxes for what you'd want in a franchise quarterback. But once it's become clear that the Jets are going to take Zack Wilson, it's like, all right, well, let me watch even more of him. Let me just obsess over this for the next month. And so I've watched every single one of his throws, especially in 2020. And yeah, he is. I mean, you see why people are excited about him. And even the concerns, one of the biggest concerns for me was when you watch him, you look at the wide pockets that he has and the 6 seconds to throw.
Yeah. But the offensive line was phenomenal this year for him, which is obviously you're not getting that with the New York Jets as currently constructed.
Exactly. And they have a lot of plays where it looks like he's playing 500. I mean, he just has the entire line of scrimmage to work with. But if you go and watch every single play, you'll see there are examples where he is under pressure and you see that fluidity and that whip-like release really, and his, body movement really coming.
I think that's his biggest pro is everybody wants to talk about the off-platform throws and just doing things that nobody else can do. And the Mahomes-esque throws that he makes. I think just his biggest pro is even on the move, he rips it. Just quick release, knows once he decides what he's doing, he can get the ball out as quick as anybody. And it's not even gets it out quick, moving against his body with power. And I guess that to an extent is an off-platform throw, but once he decides, he rips it immediately. There's no second guessing. The mechanics are good. He has that, to me, is his biggest pro, is the quick release, and he's still got power behind it. There's no second guessing when he decides what he wants to do.
Right. I mean, he's loose. He's twitchy. His anticipation and his timing is really good. He's a fast processor. And even though he's playing, another concern was the level of competition. And even though he's playing mostly bad competition, it's still the skill of having to thread the needle with a football, in a tight foot window. That still translates to the NFL.
That's the thing that I always go back and forth on with Tate particularly about is he wants to say North Dakota State is better than everybody they play, which is a fact. And half of Trey Lance's guys are wide open because they're just better than the people they're lining up against. You still have to hit the wide open guys.
Right.
If you're not making those plays, then there's a real conversation hey, why are you not hitting that guy who has 5 yards of separation down the field? Zack Wilson, might have been playing with a better team than most of the teams he played against, but he made the throws. There was nothing left on the table. If he sucked and didn't use the good athletes on his team to his advantage, then there's a conversation. But he took advantage of everything that he was given, essentially.
Yeah, I think another thing in terms of the competition with Wilson is that BYU is really good, and you could probably argue they were better than every team they faced. Maybe Coastal's a debate, but they elevated a lot with him the past couple of years. They haven't really been a factory for talent. Jamal Williams is the only offensive player they had drafted the past decade. And then this year, they're going to have maybe 3 guys in addition to Zack Wilson, at least 2 with Christensen and Milne, maybe Bushman. But I don't think that's a coincidence. I think a big part of that is just him elevating them and making them look better than the competition.
And even so, you go back to the 2019, and again, he's banged up. He has an injury history to an extent, right? But 2019 tape is it's not even that bad. It's not burn the world down good, but it's not like he came out of nowhere. It's and I hate to do this because he's obviously not Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow was a good college quarterback who then became a great one. Like we literally saw this last year that Joe Burrow was, on the radar as a redshirt senior on draft boards, just like down the list somewhere, and then had perhaps the greatest college season of all time. We've seen 1 year turnarounds and the USC game in 2019 against a real team, like he looked fine and he looked ready to play against that competition. It's like this truly came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for the Jets is he's just such a perfect scheme fit for a Shanahan or a LaFleur type of QB. And you see the Mahomes comparisons with Zack Wilson. I actually kind of want to get your thoughts on who you have him compared to if you had to make a comparison. Because when I watch it, like you see the Mahomes stuff, but I think Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he just has a different skill set than everybody else.
It's not fair to anybody to even bring that up.
I do see definitely as a ceiling, though. I mean, you do see the Aaron Rodgers and Zack Wilson's game, but like, obviously that's more of a ceiling comparison. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different players that I think you can identify Zack Wilson with. But the biggest thing is that he is that new age quarterback where you have to be able to, we talked about the arm angles, but it's that athleticism, that ability to throw off any platform, the ability to change your arm angles. I mean, that's the 2020 type of quarterback that you're seeing with Josh Allen and Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, all those type of guys. Zack Wilson is definitely in that mold, and it's exciting. But who do you have as kind of maybe a comparison for the type of career you think he'll have?
I mean, I think this is another pretty easy one, especially when you look at. So he is 6'1", 210, like that's the measurement. It doesn't look like that on tape. Like everybody thought he was smaller than that, and it was kind of a surprise what he did end up measuring at Pro Day. So when you look at that and just the play style, he's not a plus runner, but he'll get you yards with his legs, kind of just like the gunslinger mentality. I think this year, especially with the guy I'm about to compare him to, you saw the success in play action, which is kind of the whole point of play action. It kind of makes everybody good, but you're looking at like higher upside Baker Mayfield, I think is the comp. It's just the same type of mentality. I don't know if Zach is as much of, like an asshole as Baker is. We haven't exactly seen that.
Oh, we've seen him get a little chippy,
cocky. We've seen him get a little chippy, but Baker is, a talker, and I would
grabbing
expect
his nuts.
Zach
Yeah,
exactly. Like Baker loved doing all that, and Baker had, one of the best college careers ever. But Baker also came in the league 2 years older than Zach Wilson is going to. I don't know. I think that's a comp, a smaller statured guy, powerful arm, experience with play action in college. And then you saw a lot of that with Cleveland this year with Stefanski that kind of broke Baker out of that mold that Freddie Kitchens had him in. I think Baker Mayfield is pretty much the fairest comp if you don't want to throw a Rodgers or a Mahomes at him.
In terms of on-field stuff, what are some of your biggest concerns for him? We know about the competition, the injuries, size, things like that, but just on-field play, what are some of your biggest question marks for him?
So this one around Twitter this week is that if you look at his heat map from this year, it's pretty much just mesh. And that's the main concept that BYU ran, which is like fine, right? Like, but that's designed to get guys open. And he was good throwing to the drag over the middle. He was good to the outside. I think what is really going to come down to, and this is like, it's a bad con, but he trusts himself too much. Yeah. He gets a little overconfident going downfield, especially where he'll just throw these balls. And everybody wants to point out the one against UNC 2 years ago, where he throws it across his body over the middle and the wide receiver catches it. I don't think it was Dax Miller. It might have been Gunnar Romney, catches it and then gets his knees taken out from under him. And Zach put him in a bad spot by hanging that ball up just a little bit too much. He throws a lot of these, especially towards the deep sideline, throws a lot of these 50-50 jump balls that you might be able to get away with in college, but outside corners with better ball skills are going to just beat you to those. And they're not going to be as successful as they were for him in college. So I think the heat map transferring over and trying to see what concepts the Jets are going to run around him, especially when he was elite running pretty much just mesh this year, is a concern for me. And then I do think he's maybe there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be welcome to the league. There's going to be, you can't do that here moments that I don't know if he's necessarily ready for yet.
Yeah. I do think though that it's really good to have Denzel Mims and Corey Davis out there. He can obviously he's going to have to.
Denzel Mims is the perfect, perfect.
Like he's going to have to learn to dial it back. Like you said, there are going to be, he's going to throw some picks that he shouldn't throw. I think he'll throw quite a few interceptions as a rookie, but he's going to learn. But at the same time, these guys can help him find that middle ground to where he knows what he can get away with because they are so good at winning those balls.
And that's the thing. When you're talking about a rookie quarterback, to me, and I said the same thing about Sam, and I obviously ended up being wrong to an extent, but a rookie quarterback on a team that is not going to make the playoffs, throw the interceptions. Screw it. Like, I want to see you be aggressive. I want to see you take shots downfield. And if guys make plays on the ball, guys make plays on the ball. At least you're ripping it. If you have the Sam Darnold bonehead play of the week every week, then that's going to be a concern for me. But if you're taking shots and you're being aggressive as a rookie and you're trying to figure out what you can do on a team that's not going to be any good, go for it. I'm not going to cry about, 20 interceptions this year.
We talked about the weaponry that surrounds him in New York, and I do think that Davis and Mims are pretty much the perfect type of receiver for Zack Wilson. But obviously, there's a lot to be done to build around him, specifically in the offensive line. There's a question mark at tight end. We don't really know who Chris Herndon is. Running backs don't really matter as much, but there's not really anybody in that stable. You could maybe use another receiver. How do you think the Jets should build around him in this draft? Because I think that unless it's just lip service, I do really believe that Douglas is going to go offensive heavy. I think he understands that, look, we're going to suck next year, but let's make the primary reason we suck our defense and do everything we can to give Zach any sort of hope for success. And that starts with building the offensive line, obviously, and attacking the offense in the draft. I don't think the Jets defense is going to be terrible, but it's you have a huge hole at corner, but it's not the end of the world if you don't fill it, if you can get some good offensive linemen in front of Zack Wilson. So how do you think the Jets should tackle building around him in this draft?
Well, when you're looking at everybody wants to, and I fall into this trap too, because I love Jalen Phillips. I absolutely love Jalen Phillips as a player, and I get the medical concerns, and I would love to have Jalen Phillips as a Jet. The problem is that I don't necessarily, if you're spending a one of these first 3 picks on an edge, or after Zack Wilson, of course, right. I think the defensive interior is good enough with Rankins and Quinnen and Franklin Myers and Foley, obviously not a pass rusher, but he's going to eat up space, to just have Carl Lawson out there. I don't think we need a premier edge talent in this class. I think that is good enough. Just get away with it. Again, this team is going to stink. Just let it happen. Take an edge rusher in 3rd, 4th round, but that is not a premier thing. Fix the offense or the cornerback first. So when you're looking at it, the Tevin Jenkins thing is really interesting to me. A guy who is an absolute mauler in the run game. Oklahoma State ran the ball more than any team in the country this year. The pass blocking is not entirely there. Not a guy I loved on tape, but is mean, is just has a lot of throw him out the club blocks, bully Joe Osai, who I know is a name that a lot of people on Jets Twitter really like as an edge, completely took him out of the game in that Texas Oklahoma State game when they were matched up against each other. I kind of like George Fant in this scheme. I don't know if right tackle, and obviously Fant is not a long-term answer. It's 2 years left on the contract, but you could get out of it after this year. You could have gotten out of it now if you wanted to. I think this scheme is pretty much the peak of George Fant. So I don't know if right tackle is necessarily the place that they need to fix immediately. So then you're looking to the interior. I do think that Creed Humphrey should probably be a target at 34. That's not a guy I would take in the 1st round. It's not even a guy I would love to take at 34. But if you're looking towards that interior, this has been a revolving door of center since Mangold left. And it's not that I don't like Connor McGovern, but Connor McGovern can play guard then next year. Obviously, I think the dream should be Elijah Vera-Tucker on the offensive line. That's not happening. I think his floor is 14 to Minnesota. I expect him to be a top half of the 1st round guy. And if you want to make a play for a cornerback, I think you can. But offensively, I think you got to shore up the interior, which seems exceedingly obvious. I don't know if you need to spend a premier pick on a wide receiver. In fact, I'd be surprised if they did. And then running back, it is what it is. I would draft one because I don't love Tevin Coleman, but at least he has experience with this scheme. It's when you're looking at the Tevin Jenkins thing in particular, are you play him in a guard this year? Because I don't actually hate George Fant right now, which I never thought I'd be able to say.
And I'm curious what you think about Creed and Tevin as early options, because the Jets are in this place where I agree with you. I think Fant is in this scheme. It's a great fit for him. He's okay. That's not the issue right now. It's the guard spots, but there aren't really any pure guard prospects that are going to be available to them. You have Humphrey, who could be there at center, and then Tevin, who could also, kick into guard, but tackle is probably the prime place you want him to be. So what do you think of the idea of those two guys? And, if they take Jenkins, could you see him at guard with the Jets? And then for Humphrey, are the Jets going to move McGovern over? Because it doesn't seem like they want to do that based on what they did in free agency. Could you see Humphrey playing guard? How do you see those two guys potentially fitting in?
I reached stick at center, and I don't want to move McGovern over. That's probably going to rule out the Creed Humphrey experience, which is fine. I'm not a huge Creed Humphrey fan. I have a second round grade on him. He tested very well at Pro Day. So a big metric that we use is relative athletic score from Math Bomb, Kenley Platt. Creed was a perfect 10. Like, he was the most athletic center in testing from Pro Day, which obviously all of these Pro Day numbers we have to take with a grain of salt because they're not real. But Creed was more athletic than I expected him to be. Pass happy offense at Oklahoma, experienced, played for a long time, has a ton of snaps under his belt. Like, that is a guy that quite frankly should be a Jet. I don't know if I'm behind drafting a pure center at 23 or 34, just value wise. I don't necessarily love it. A guy later on that I think you get the similar production out of, not as technically sound, not as polished as Creed Humphrey, is Kendrick Green from Illinois. That's a guy you're targeting in the third round or even in the fourth. I don't know exactly where he's going to go. I have a top 100 grade on him. I would take him in the top 100 guaranteed, but that's a guy I really like. He gets off. He has guard experience and center experience, something the Jets should be looking for. He gets off the snap and is just kind of like a chicken without his head cut off, just looking for somebody to maul. And once he gets his hands on somebody, he's great. But he runs around kind of aimlessly when you watch him, which is obviously not what you want. But the Jets should have a good offensive line coach, a good offensive scheme in there to try to rein him in. So that's a guy I would more target for the interior and not spending one of these premium picks on him. And then Tevin Jenkins, I don't know if he gets to 23. The Raiders apparently love him at 17 from everything I've heard, which would be a total Gruden pick.
Yeah.
Worst comes to worst, I do think he can play guard next year. Just like vera-tucker, I've been pretty adamant that any of these tweener guys, Slater included, who's obviously not going to be a Jet, and vera-tucker has a small chance, but I am pro put everybody at center or put everybody at tackle and see what happens. And if it busts, it busts. And the Jets don't have an opening at tackle is the problem. But vera-tucker would have to slide in. Any of these guys would then slide out next year if Fant does end up getting cut. Another guy like that could be a tweener is Dylan Raiden from North Dakota State, who I really like, who's a really good athlete, but never dominated the FCS competition like you would like. Never had like the Trey Lance relative year to an offensive lineman.
Right.
It was a little bit undersized, barely got to 300 pounds at Pro Day, but that's a guy that I think has a lot of potential. Is a very good athlete, especially if you're moving him to the interior. And then the last guy who is going to get first round hype that has kind of now died down when everybody sits down and takes a longer look at the injury history is Landon Dickerson, who is a great player, but this guy has 4 consecutive years of season-ending injuries. I can't get behind that at 23 or 34, but has experience at all spots across the offensive line, which I think is important when you have all of these holes like the Jets do. I can't get behind the injury history as high as he's going to go or as high as the Jets have picks. That's another guy to keep an eye on. And then even to a lesser extent, I think Leatherwood probably is a better guard than he is a tackle. 34, I wouldn't take him at 23. 34, he could be a target. That feels like a senior leader, a captain, a guy that Douglas would like. I'm personally not a fan, but it feels like it should be on the table.
Do you think Dickerson is a scheme fit for the Jets?
See, that's the thing. I don't actually even know if he is, because he is like this year, especially when you moved him to center, he's not exactly like he's this uber athletic guy in testing, and everybody saw like the cartwheel he did behind Mac at Pro Day, like even with a torn ACL. I don't know how he's going to fit in kind of like this zone scheme that they're going to run. I don't know if that's a guy you really can get outside in space like they're probably going to want him to. Whereas Kendrick Green, I think, is a perfect scheme fit for this. And that's a guy I would love to have on the Jets at some point. It's just, I think Kendrick Green is probably even going to go higher than I have him ranked. And that's where it's going to come down to. Like Wyatt Davis, I didn't even mention. I don't like Wyatt Davis. He got hurt in that last game. That's a guy that was the 23 pick forever and now has fallen outside of the first round. I don't know where Wyatt Davis goes. I doubt Joe Douglas has crossed him off, but I don't know if that's necessarily a scheme fit either.
Yeah, how would you balance, I guess, or how do you hope Joe Douglas balances taking the best player available, considering you're still a bad team and you're probably not going anywhere next year, versus targeting the positions you need, versus also factoring in the scheme fit and trying to draft players that are going to succeed in this Saleh and LaFleur, playbook.
So that's the thing. If we're talking like pure best player available, and I think would be a great scheme fit, it's just not necessarily a position of need. Obviously, it's a position of need. The Jets need good football players. That's what I've said this whole time. And Zaven Collins is a very good football player. That's a guy that at 23, I watched Zaven Collins. That guy could play the Fred Warner role in this defense and is like totally in. And I would love to have on this team. Don't see it happening. Like I cannot imagine they invest in like an off-ball linebacker in the first round, which is with as many holes as this team has. So then it's like, okay, Zaven Collins is a great player who I want. There are wide receivers. Bateman gets there. I want him. Kadarius Toney, I want him. I don't know if that's necessarily the step, considering Crowder is still here. You're drafting fourth wide receiver. I don't know if that's the step at 23 or 34. So then you're looking at corner, edge, and offensive lineman. And the offensive lineman, whoever you take, in theory, is probably going to have to play out of position, because I would lean tackle over interior unless you're taking Creed and keeping him at center. I don't actually know what he's going to do at 23. I think the conspiracy theory that I've been peddling is that, and I've heard a couple things, is that they might be trying to move up for a cornerback to jump Tennessee at 22. And I think they have a very good relationship with Indianapolis's front office to get to 21 just before Tennessee. I think that could happen for a Newsome, or if JC Horn falls, you'd have to get more aggressive than 21. But I think that's another guy that would be great for this team. Not exactly a scheme fit. Didn't play a lot of zone, but that is your like alpha dog outside corner. And if he's falling, go get him. Newsome and Farley, injury concerns. I think Farley's probably out of the first round over the last 24 hours now, but Farley is not a guy I would expect Joe Douglas to take the risk on at 23, especially if you're taking a swing on Zack Wilson.
What about
Greg
34?
Newsome, 34 is where you start thinking about it. Because if he's healthy, I'd have him as a top 12 guy. The back injuries for an athletic cornerback it's not the way you want to start. Certainly.
Yeah, and he hurt it deadlifting is what I was reading.
Yep. Pulled it deadlifting at least once, and teams think he's going to get needs another surgery based off the medicals that they have. So this is a guy you took Bryce Hall last year, great pick for the value, but that was in the 5th round. You're not taking Bryce Hall at 34. So it's a pretty big difference between those two. And Bryce Hall was a very good college player before he got hurt as well. So I'm not putting Bryce Hall in the same tier as Caleb Farley. Caleb Farley is a much better prospect than Bryce Hall was, but you're going to take 2 injured cornerbacks in back-to-back years. And who knows if Caleb Farley plays this year? Don't see that in the cards. Newsome can't stay healthy. I like Newsome. We had Peyton Ramsey on the show last week, actually, Northwestern's quarterback, and he said that Greg Newsome is like the biggest shit talker in the world, which I love. Like, if I'm going for these outside cornerbacks, like I want the Sherman, Jalen Ramsey, alpha dog type thing that are just going to get in everybody's face. I think Greg Newsome is a great scheme fit. I do think you're going to have to jump Tennessee for him, though. So you got to get up to 21 to do that. So I think if they go up from 23, I would expect down from 34. There was just a report, I forget who put it out, but I read it literally like 20 minutes before jumping on here, that ETN might be in play at 34, which I hope is a smokescreen, because God help us if that happens. But the best player available thing versus scheme fit versus what does this team actually need? This team needs good football players.
Right.
But this team needs certain positions of offensive line and cornerback more than anything else. And that's where I think he's going to focus, at least early on.
I was just going to ask you the running back question before you just mentioned ETN, because I think all three of us are in agreement that out of every single position on a football team, running back is probably the most replaceable. And you can draft somebody on day 3 and get a guy you can start on day 1. So it's just like, but if Najee Harris, if Travis Etienne, if you're in love with Javonte Williams, is sitting there at 34, and let's say they tackle into your offensive line at 23, would you be mad if the Jets took one of them?
Yeah. I mean, depending on the corner board. Yeah. I kind of love the corner board in the early round 2 range. So you have the top 4, and then it's who knows what Caleb Farley is right now, but he's 4th out of 4 for me. But those would be the big 4. Surtain, not a Jet, JC Horn, stranger things have happened, not a Jet. Greg Newsome, possibly a Jet. Caleb Farley, I'd be surprised. But those are the four. And then you're going down to Eric Stokes, Ife Melifanu, Elijah Molden, I don't think is necessarily a scheme fit as a slot only guy. Tyson Campbell, like I like all of those guys. The corners, Asante Samuel, like the corners, you could order like 7 guys after the top 4 in any order, and I'd be like, cool. Like I love Paulson Adebo from Stanford.
Yeah.
Opted out this year. He's got ball production in this corner class. He was phenomenal and then decided to come back this year. Could have entered the draft last year and then didn't. And he was planning on coming back this year to up his stock and then just opted out, which I don't know why you just didn't go back last year if you weren't 100% dead set on playing this year. But that's a guy who's a long zone corner who has great ball production. That's a guy I would love. Probably not at 34, but if he gets to 66, cool, go do it. Fantastic. Awesome. But I think Iffy, Syracuse guy, great scheme fit, perfect zone corner, long, rangy, Richard Sherman esque body build, great athlete for his size. I think that's a guy you'd probably have to target at 34 because you're never going to see him again. I think if he's a slam dunk top 40-ish guy, I think Buffalo's going to take him at 30. So if he gets to 34, I'd run the card in. I might like the Stokes, Iffy, Asante Samuel value, or much more the Paulson Adebo value at 66 than taking a Newsome and probably trading up for a Newsome at 21. But then the question remains, what the hell do you do at 23 if you're not taking a quarterback? Because you're overdrafting an interior offensive lineman if vera-tucker isn't there.
You're not a Tyson Campbell guy either, right?
I'm not. I like Stokes a lot better. It's not that I'm against Tyson Campbell. I think Tyson Campbell is way more versatile. He has way more inside and outside snaps from Georgia. He's long, he's rangy, he's bigger than Stokes is. I just think Stokes is a better athlete. I like Stokes' tape better. Tyson Campbell had a really rough year. He was the guy matched up against the other team's X most of the time. He got bodied by Josh Palmer. He got beat up against Alabama. Everybody did. But I think Tyson Campbell had a rough year that's going to push him down boards. I'd still expect him to go in the second round. Not a 34 guy for me. And I like Adebo more than him if it comes down to it.
Where would you go for a running back in this draft? For the Jets, where is your preferred spot to start targeting one? And then who are some of your favorite prospects in that area?
So I think you that's the thing. It's I don't really want to take one with the Seattle third rounder, but that's the earliest I'd think about it. Is at, what is that, 86? I think it is. Yeah, 86. Yeah. That's the earliest I'd start thinking about it. I do think Kenny Gainwell is a good scheme fit here. I think Michael is a good scheme fit here. Again, you're looking for these guys with receiving ability who can bounce the ball. Those two are undersized. Those two are Kenny Gainwell, at least, was a slot receiver 2 years ago and then was a running back in his last year of college. Another guy who opted out this year. And then even further down the list, if you're getting more towards 4th, 5th round type guys, I would prefer to not take a running back until day 3. I've done a lot of slandering of Chuba Hubbard. I don't particularly love him. Had a really down year this year. I do think he would be a scheme fit. That's somebody that I would expect they might target in 4 or 5. Javion Hawkins has experience with Becton at Louisville. I like Javion Hawkins as a player a lot. That's another guy to keep an eye on. But I really do think Carter and Gainwell at that second, 3rd round pick, the Seattle 3rd round pick, is where I'd start thinking about it if they get there. I do think both of them would be a fit. I would prefer to just punt it more towards the Chuba Hubbard, Javion Hawkins on day 3.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think day 3 is definitely the spot for running back. Before we get into our mock drafts, because we each have a mock draft, I just want to clarify a few things. One, who are some of your favorite picks for 23? If they're on the board, you run into the podium. And then the same question for 34. Before we get into what we would do or the hypotheticals, I just want a list of some players for 23 and 34 that have the PJ Clerk stamp of approval.
Yeah, so the run the card in at 23 is J.C. Horn, which is obviously not happening, but we can dream. And I would get aggressive. So the way I'm looking at it is that this team has 21 picks over the next 2 years. They can't all make the team. So I would expect either a move up to get aggressive, to go get a cornerback in the 1st round, or when we get to day 3, the Philly connection, you mentioned Chris Herndon is a giant question mark. Could I see a 5th round pick for Zach Ertz? Sure. If another veteran becomes available this year, we traded a 6 for Brandon Marshall, something like that. Like, okay, cool. Go do that. Cause all of these picks over the next 2 years, you don't have the roster space for 21 guys over the next 2 years. So 23, JC Horn, who I would be comfortable to move up to get, go do it. Elijah Vera-Tucker, I'm not trading up for a guard because that's where he would play for this team. We'll get him if he's at 23. I am a Jalen Phillips guy. I would think about it. I know I said that edge isn't necessarily a pressing need, but I do think on talent alone, he's a top 10, top 12 player in this class. Obviously, there's a lot of other concerns with him, and he would be a great scheme fit for this defense, especially opposite a guy like Carl Lawson. I do think I would give that a stamp of approval. Greg Newsome, I'm in. Like, I don't know if I'm running the card in, but Greg Newsome is quite frankly what I expect to happen, whether they move up to 21 or just take him at 23. Cool. After that, I think those are like my primary guys. I wouldn't be ecstatic with Creed. I wouldn't be ecstatic with Tevin Jenkins. I'd be fine. I understand the rationale. I just playing a guy out of position, drafting him in the first round is not exactly my ideal outcome as in their rookie years. But they're good players. The Jets need good players. I've said it 1,000 times. And you're looking at 34. That's where I think you start to look if one of the bigger wide receivers falls out of the first round. If Bateman gets to 34, that's a run the card in type thing for me. I think you're going to look at Farley. I wouldn't be over the moon, but I feel better than I would at 23. Who iffy at 34, I'd like Asante Samuel. This is, of course, if you don't go corner in the first round. If you don't go corner in the first round, 34 better be a corner, would be my narrative. And you could take pretty much any of them, and I'd be on board.
Before we get into the mock, I want to ask you, would you be okay with Owusu-Koramoah at 23?
So that's a guy that I think Robert Saleh could deploy, would have a lot of fun with, right? My question with him is if you're expecting him to be a linebacker, I think he's probably a will, which is the common trait of thought. I think he might even be a safety at his size. And listen, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is just like a missile. He's a rocket of a football player, a guy I would kill to have on my team, can cover pretty much everybody downfield, might be the best coverage linebacker in this class. Has problems block shedding because he only weighs 210, 215, and everybody wants to throw out the Darius Leonard comp, but I think that's entirely lazy in play style and expecting him to be that good. I think I feel more comfortable, honestly, with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at both positions of linebacker and safety than I did with Isaiah Simmons last year. Isaiah Simmons I loved as a safety, which he played at Clemson, and Arizona made him a linebacker, which I thought would be a mistake. And he had a rough year. He came on a little bit at the end, but that's a guy they spent the top 10 pick on and tried to change the way he played. And it didn't necessarily work. I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a defensive weapon, can do whatever you're going to be able to ask him to. This team needs secondary help. This team needs linebacker help. I'd be surprised if he got to 23. If he does, I don't know if he'd be my first choice, but I'm not going to be mad about it.
Before we get into the mock, because this is going to be a segue right into, I'll start with the mock because maybe we should say PJ for last. And PJ, I want your thoughts on both Michael and I's mock. But before we hop into it, I think maybe a criticism you may have for my mock is not necessarily surrounding Zach with as much skill position talent. I don't take a receiver until day 3. I do take a tight end.
That's the thing. I'm okay with waiting on receiver until day 3.
Right.
There's so much receiver talent, and you're going to see this. And this is something I've said a lot, that wide receiver classes are going to continue to get better and better, because now when you're at, a young age, even in high school, the best athletes are now playing wide receiver. It's just like you want to get the ball in their hands, and they're going to progress through college, and the wide receiver classes are going to be progressively deeper. I think there are a lot of day 3 guys that would just be a great scheme fit. Just rip them this year as wide receiver 4 or even 5 behind Keelan Cole. Crowder's gone next year. Fit in any number of guys playing the slot next year. Cool. I'm in. I'm not going to get on you for waiting on a wide receiver because quite frankly, unless Bateman gets to 34, that's what I would do as well.
Who are some of your favorite day 2 and day 3 receivers that the Jets could target?
Number one is Anthony Schwartz as kind of like the Deebo Samuel. So Anthony Schwartz is like literally an Olympic sprinter and unsprinting. He can't do anything else. This is just like scheme the ball into his hands and let him run. And he's going to run nines down the field and just beat people. But Auburn listen, Bo Nix sucks. Auburn did not do a good job of getting the ball to Anthony Schwartz and Seth Williams this year. But Anthony Schwartz, I feel like, is this Deebo Samuel dynamic, Brendan Ayuk like type receiver in this kind of offense. That would be great. To a lesser extent, Jalen Darden from North Texas, another guy I love, another speedy guy, another slot guy that could come in and play the slot. Those would be the two I particularly love for the Jets. Another guy that I love as a player that I don't know if the Jets are ever going to be in a position to take is Amari Rodgers, who is, a senior leader, a captain, a guy that Joe Douglas fits the mold of, at least from last year. I just love him as a player, being the number one receiver after Justin Ross went down, being Trevor's favorite target. They asked him to do a lot more than he ever had before, but he's small. He's 5'9". This is going to be a slot only guy at the next level. Something the Jets need, because Denzel Mims isn't going anywhere. Corey Davis isn't going anywhere. Jameson Crowder's got 1 year left. So you need a good slot receiver for next year.
And this is the draft to do it, to get one.
This is the draft to do it. And then even further down the list, if you want to look to outside, my two kind of sleepers, I love Simi Fehoko from Stanford. Just a big athletic type guy. I actually think he goes higher than people are going to expect. This is probably a day two guy. I don't know if I'd take him there. Duane Estridge is offensive coordinator, I believe, from Western Michigan, is, I believe, the offensive line coach for the Jets now. He's on staff in some capacity. So I think Duane Estridge is another good just speedster type guy. Ran slower than expected at the 40 at Pro Day, but had a good Senior Bowl. I do think that's another guy. He's 6'1", so I don't know if he's necessarily a slot. That's a guy I could see them targeting. And then lastly, Josh Imatorbhebhe from Illinois. This dude is like homeless, absolutely like desolate DK Metcalf. Like he exclusively runs slants and nines, has a drop problem, like might be the best athlete period in this class, broke the NFL's record for vertical jump, had a 47-inch vertical, total athletic marvel, huge guy, 6'3", built like everything you want, looks like DK Metcalf. If they taught him how to play wide receiver and taught him how to catch the ball, that's a high upside pick that I'd love in 5 or 6. But I when it comes down to it, I expect Dax Milne is going to be a New York Jet, which I'd be fine with. I think if they're only drafting one wide receiver, I think they're going to try to get Zach his guy.
I like it. All right, let's hop right into it. You did mention a few names that did come up in my mock. All right, obviously pick number 2, Zack Wilson. Enough said. We've talked about him. We don't have to break it down. 23. I think if Tevin Jenkins is on the board, Joe Douglas takes him immediately.
I probably agree with that right now.
I think he's just such a Joe Douglas player. I think Owusu-Koramoah is a guy to keep an eye out for, and it's kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. Is Joe Douglas going to put his money where his mouth is and build around Zach? But how do you balance that with best player available on a team that isn't expected to do much this year? And he's a perfect fit for Robert Saleh. You're going to make your head coach happy. I'd keep an eye out for him, but I have Tevin Jenkins. If he falls, I think he's the pick. At 34, again, PJ, we are in agreement here. I had him taking Ife Melifonwu. Both you and I have seen him play in person. I think he's going to be a terrific scheme fit. I love the fit there. I'm really excited. I hope he makes it to 34. If he doesn't, I could definitely see an Eric Stokes or a Asante Samuel. I think the Jets will take a corner at 34. Just when you look at even San Francisco, how they built their offensive line, it wasn't like they invested a lot into the guard position. I think Joe Douglas, who has made his bread and butter drafting and scouting offensive line, is comfortable waiting until round 3 to get another guy.
A guy we haven't talked about yet. I don't know if Cam Clerk is a nothing burger yet. They clearly do not have any faith in him and didn't have any faith in him last year. He's a high upside guy that was a good athlete that played at, Charlotte. So again, the level of competition, but had good tape against Clemson in his senior year and impressed when he played against bigger teams. The not playing him last year concerned me, but I'm giving Joe the benefit of the doubt that I think Cam Clark is a starter on this offensive line at some point here.
I think he definitely needs to get in this year. You're right. I knew it was going to be a redshirt year for Cam Clark, as did everybody else, but I'm surprised it was an actual redshirt year, I figured he would go in for maybe a few plays.
When you're 0-13,
right, exactly. Like just throw him in there. I mean, like,
Josh Andrews was playing guard for us.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is concerning.
Which could be, we don't know for sure whether that is just a sign that Clark might not be any good, or if they were just really committed to he's not playing this year. But we'll see.
I think it was probably they were pretty committed to that, and I think they just saw him in practice, and that's always the thing that you always forget as fans. It's like these coaches. I mean, look, Adam Gase's coaching staff might not know their left from their right, but they are watching him every single day, and I think they can at least draw the conclusion: okay, this kid's not ready. Let's not throw him out there and give him any scars. At 66, though, I did go back to the interior offensive line. I think Kendrick Green, which may be a little early for him, but I like the scheme fit a lot. I think again he's a Joe Douglas type player, and then you have him and Tevin Jenkins as your guards, at least for this year. You might boot Tevin out to right tackle next year. But I think that's at least you're building a wall in front of Zack Wilson. So I said, let's go get him a weapon. And another guy who's going to really help out in the blocking game, that's Tommy Tremble, who I know PJ.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let's go, baby.
So we
you stole that one for me too. I would.
I think our mocks are going to be very similar. But I mean, if you add Tevin Jenkins, Kendrick Green, and Tommy Tremble, I mean, you're going to be able to pound the rock. Screw taking a running back at 34. You're going to be able to pound the rock, and you're going to be able to protect your franchise quarterback, which is the goal.
I think Tommy Tremble, just going off on this tangent, I guess I could get more into it when I inevitably take him in my mock. Tommy Tremble is my pick for best guy who is way better, the most better as a pro than he was in college. Like that is my pick for Tommy Tremble, is that Notre Dame didn't use him, only played him at 12, played him as a fullback, never had more than 19 catches in a year. But this is a guy who ran the fastest 40 as a high school senior at the opening for tight ends, like athletic marvel, built dude. Relative to position, I think he's the best run blocker in the class. I think he's a better run blocker than anybody at the tight end position by such a wide margin, like more than Tevin Jenkins might be the best run blocking tackle or whatnot. Tommy Tremble is like, especially for a team that in theory made a run for Kyle Juszczyk before he went back to San Francisco. This is a guy that I think pigeonholing him as a fullback would even be a mistake because he's so athletic and did produce a little bit when they got the ball in his hands, had yards after the catch ability there. I think this is like, obviously I'm not comparing anybody to George Kittle, but it's the same type of offense. Yeah. He's the same plus blocker, and he's the same type of athlete there. I think Tommy Tremble needs to be a Jet when this is
and when was the last time the Jets had a player like him where you can just fully scheme up plays for, I mean, like, look, he right now is not going to come in and immediately be George Kittle, like you're saying, but I think he's the perfect guy to bring in to not only compete and support Chris Herndon, because I think he's coming in, he's immediately a great tight end too, just based off his blocking alone. But then he has that ceiling, and you can play around with him. You can move him in the backfield, put him at fullback.
You can get really creative,
right?
Like
he's an
really,
H-back.
really creative. Yeah, and he's like, remember Enunwa's first year where they had no idea what to do with him and effectively played him at H-back? Like, okay, you're drafting Tommy Tremble to be Quincy Enunwa pretty much, and it's gonna work because he is a hell of a football player.
And that's fine. I mean, look, we've talked about it. Zack Wilson's going to need play action to succeed. I mean, that part of the reason they had such these big 500 pockets that we were talking about earlier. The way you do that is you line up under center, you play action, and then all of a sudden your quarterback's 10 yards deep and he has space to operate. I think the Jets are going to obviously run a ton of play action, and a guy like Tremble is perfect for that game, especially if they could take the two offensive linemen that I mentioned ahead of him. I got a little lucky here at the start of day 3. Kenneth Gainwell failed me, and I was pretty set on taking that point. If he's there, I mean, I'm going to take him. I think he's again a good scheme fit, and lets the Jets, establish that ground and pound football. And then at 146, I took another one of your guys, Anthony Schwartz, who again, it's just like scheme up plays for him. Is he a full complete receiver at this point in the game? No, but you already have one of the best slot receivers in the entire league in Jamison Crowder. So it's not like he's going to be forced to play it too much. You have Keelan Cole ahead of him, but you could just design plays for him. Like you said, he has Olympic speed, and I would love to see. I think he's just a different type of receiver. The Jets are missing that burner. So him or Darden at 146 are my favorites.
Yeah, if you're just picking, like, if I could have my pick of the litter for one wide receiver, I might be the biggest Kadarius Toney guy alive, but for this team needs Anthony Schwartz or Jalen Darden. Like, it's pretty much just as simple as that. You got to make a move for one of those two guys. I think Darden is a much better player, much more complete player, because Anthony Schwartz is just the straight line speed. I love Jalen Darden as a receiver currently, but let's go. One of these guys has to be a Jet.
Yeah. And then after that, And look, I had one defensive player this entire time. So I was like, okay, let's go help Robert Saleh out a little bit. I gave him a linebacker in Tony Fields II from West Virginia, who's just an athlete.
Tony Fields, I like him. Yep.
I like him at that will spot. I think it's, again, I think, that linebacker position, and this may upset a lot of Jets fans, if there's a good linebacker at 34 that they really like, and, Jamin Davis or Jabril Cox are the two guys that are kind of in that area, I could see him doing it.
Jabril Cox would be really interesting, like really, really interesting, because this is like just your pure coverage linebacker. Right. I don't think he's a 3-down guy. And when you're looking at this linebacker class, especially, it's not a lot of mics. Like there's just, and it's not a need for the Jets. So I think that because CJ is apparently coming back and ready to play football now. So
we'll see after the next 3 days, if he's still a Jet, then he'll be on the team.
That is actually very true. But when you're looking at it right now, I think all of these like outside linebacker types, probably the right move for the Jets. I think Jabril Cox is as good as Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is. I like him more as a safety. Jabril Cox is like the coverage. Like this guy manned up Kyle Pitts 45 yards downfield. I don't know what more I need to say than that. Like this guy is capable. And unlike Dylan Raiden, did dominate at North Dakota State, like had the tape, had the accolades, was a great player, and then transferred up to the SEC for the defending national champions and held his own against Kyle Pitts and everybody else they matched him up against. I think Jabril Cox would get really interesting. If Zaven falls out of the first round, 34, that's one guy that I'm totally taking a look at.
I think there's a chance Zaven could go ahead at Micah Parsons, which would be like pretty crazy. I don't think Zaven makes it. I don't even think Zaven makes it to 23. But the thing with the linebacker is that, it's kind of two sides of the same coin where it's such a good linebacker class. These are exactly the type of linebackers that they need, but also it's such a deep linebacker class that it's like, hey, we need to help this rookie quarterback out. Tony Fields might not be the long-term starter there, but at least bring in a body. And Robert Saleh, like Joe Douglas made his bones scouting offensive linemen, Robert Saleh made his way in this league coaching up linebackers. So I kind of like the idea of taking a developmental linebacker and handing it to Saleh and telling him, look, we're going to address talent at other places. Can you get this guy to at least compete? I like the competition between him and Blake Cashman at the will spot will be interesting.
That's kind of the thing. So it's like you could take Jamin Davis at 34 if he even gets there, unconvinced. But Jamin Davis played Mike for Kentucky this year. Kentucky's defense, they did a lot. They pretty much had a new scheme every week. They did nothing consistently. It's partially why I don't like Kelvin Joseph. Kelvin Joseph never played man. He just did whatever they asked him to. They changed their defense every week. Jamin Davis played Mike for them interior and was good. Not great in the run game. He's a crazy, crazy athlete, but this is a guy I think is a will at the next level. You look at him at 34 for sure. I wouldn't take him. I have him in the late 50s on my board. I expect him to go way earlier than that. I might expect him to go tomorrow night or tonight when you're listening to this. But I think linebacker at 34 shouldn't be necessarily a cross off, but if you don't go corner in round one, that's obviously my preference. But you mentioned it. Drafting to the strengths of this new coaching staff, it's kind of like one of my co-hosts on Boomer Bust, Nick Merriam, is a Washington fan. Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio have made their bones coaching up linebackers and developing linebackers. So he doesn't want a linebacker at 19 because he thinks they can take a third or fourth round guy and get production and opportunity costs taking a Darisaw at 19 or whatever instead of a Zaven Collins. You can get the relative cost in the third round. Saleh, another linebacker guy. I don't know if you necessarily need to take one super, super early because he has that experience.
Yeah, I think this is also the best coach, at least on paper, the best coaching staff the Jets have had since the early Rex Ryan days.
I feel shockingly confident in all of this.
Exactly. I feel shockingly confident in not only the management or the coaching. So that's why even if this year the Jets go 6-10, I'm still feeling pretty optimistic. It will be 2 or 3 years down from now, if I'll know if we're right. But if you have confidence in your coaching staff, I don't think you have to weigh college production as much. I think you're looking, especially on day 3, you're looking at guys who have the tools and the guys that you can develop. With my the last 2 picks, the last one I took a kicker and Jose Borregales, but at 186, I took Joshua Kendo, who 6'7", edge from Florida State. Right now, is he an elite edge rushing prospect? No, but he has the tools that if he could put it together 2 or 3 years from now, he could be an absolute menace. And he's a perfect fit in Robert Saleh's defense, those big 5-tech defensive ends. So I liked him at the end of the draft. But yeah, kind of going back to what we were saying, though, with the coaching staff, if you're confident in them, you don't have to weigh college production as much. You're looking to get guys. Obviously, early you want good players, but the later you go, you're kind of looking, who can we get that has the tools that we can use to coach them up?
That's actually something that I think he might have screwed up, honestly, last year. In that he took Clark, and the James Morgan pick is what it is, and that's the one black mark I have for Joe Douglas currently. But
Ryan, I don't love either.
You took P. Ryan too early,
yeah.
And then I think 23, quite frankly, is going to set the tone for the rest of the weekend. It's going to be I am just anxious to see if he falls back into this trap of taking ancient senior, redshirt senior, like captains, like leadership guys, because that's what everything happened last year. And Zuniga is another toolsy edge rusher who never saw the field this year and did a whole lot of nothing. And you took that guy over Brian Edwards, who this team would have been desperate for this year. And I loved coming out last year and had, got hurt a couple of times for the Raiders, but at least got snaps and played meaningful snaps for a team that was much better than the Jets. I do think they take an edge at some point that is going to be more of a toolsy guy. I think Kendo is a very, very good answer for that. I think they might address it a little earlier, but I have more faith in this staff than anything else to develop these guys. But when you're looking at especially day 3 picks, I understand Ashton Davis was day 2, but you're falling into the trap of Mike McCagnon. Ashton Davis is like old. And I don't know if I want all of these developed, like maybe not the highest ceiling because they are what they are, but they're leaders and stuff like that. Yeah. That the trap they fell into last year. I think 23 is kind of going to set the tone. If they take a toolsy guy at 23, I think we might see a really, really fun draft for this team.
And look, this is speculation, but again, maybe Joe Douglas didn't have the same faith in that coaching staff to develop those guys.
Which is
just like
fair. Totally fair.
Let's take the high production guys. Let's get some good football players in this building. And now it's like, if you have faith in Robert Saleh's coaching staff, you're opening yourself up to take.
I would bet too, and obviously we don't know how good the Douglas Gase relationship actually is or was. And
he got him hired,
but Douglas now has his coach, and like I think Saleh and this staff has more of an input than is going to have more of an input than I think we might expect in these.
I think he. It could be lip service, but I like that he preaches a collaborative approach where it's basically like, you tell us what you're looking for and we're going to go find it. And it's not just trying to jam a square, peg into a round hole, which it feels like the Jets didn't really have much of a plan the last decade of their drafting, where it's just like, it was just kind of taking it as the board fell and they didn't really have a plan. That's they ended up with like 6 defensive linemen.
That's the thing.
And you're playing Quentin Coples and Sheldon Richardson standing up. I think they're going to have a lot more of a succinct plan. I think that they're going to be drafting players to fit in a role. I think that they're not going to just double dip at a position. Like Zuniga is an excellent example where I think he is a toolsy guy. I want to see him this year. And I think it would be kind of dumb to take an edge early. I mean, look, if there's a really guy like Jalen Phillips at 23, the injury concerns are there, but it's like, I think they're going to follow a plan, because it's like, well, if you take a young guy, it's like, what are you going to do with Zuniga? Like I know you can't just ignore talent because of a guy like that, or Ashton Davis is another example, but it's like, you have Carl Lawson, you have Vinny Curry. This is a guy, he is in that role of young developmental edge rusher. And if you take another one, especially early, you just don't really have much of a plan there. So I think Joe Douglas is going to have a plan, and he's going to stick to it. And that's what I think I respect the most about him. But we want to get to Michael's before we get to yours. So and I do want to add, because I think you mentioned a little bit ago, I would not be surprised if Joe Douglas trades up. He was a part of a front office of Philadelphia that was very aggressive. I think you're going to see a lot of moves this weekend. I think they will move up at 23, or I shouldn't say I think they will. I think I would put it at like a 50% chance. I think it's very likely that he's going to look at that board, especially if there's a bit of a run on offensive linemen. But if it's like Elijah Vera-Tucker, if Slater falls past 15, if you're worried about the Raiders taking Jenkins, I think the Jets are just outside the spot where they can feel comfortable they're going to get one of those linemen that they like. So I would not be surprised to see them move up at 23. And then, like you said, 34, I could see him moving back just because it's such a deep class. On that day 2 is the meat of it. PJ, I want your thoughts. How would you grade this draft, which is mostly offensive heavy, a lot of offensive linemen? I know you love the Tremble pick. I know you love the Schwartz pick, but your thoughts on it. And then Michael, I want your thoughts on it before we hop into your mock draft.
If that's what happens, I am happy come Saturday afternoon.
Right.
I just I would be, there's a lot of guys that I like that I think are very good scheme fits from there. It totally depends. And you're going to see my thoughts and kind of stream of consciousness develop, because we're going to be alive for the entire first round. But as the board falls around 23, if Tevin ends up being the guy, just the way the board falls, if the board falls that way, where Tevin is the pick and there's not a lot of things that they can do otherwise, cool, right? Great, awesome. I'm not going to be mad at it. It's a high potential pick. It's a good bookend after this year to have him and Becton on the sides. I do think he's a scheme fit. He has, experience in kind of a zone running. I like it. If that's the way the board falls, that's the way the board falls. Again, as I said before, I'm unconvinced they stay at 23. I think a move up is totally in the cards somewhere. And then if you look at the cornerbacks, Iffy, great pick. I'd be surprised, A, if he got there, and B, if they actually did it, but cool, awesome. I mean, listen, and Kendo especially is one of my later round guys that I really, really like. I think you could get away with, especially when you have Tommy Tremble, who I expect to be a very good receiver. You could get away with only one receiver. You got the perfect one for this defense, or for this offense, rather. I really, if that is the end result come Saturday afternoon, and we obviously can't predict what veterans are going to be around to trade for, maybe a first round pick again for Zach Ertz, like I said, or something like that before.
Yeah, they're not having all these picks. That was a great point you raised earlier, that the 21 picks, they can't all make the roster, so they're going to have to be creative here.
And this is something that the Jets have done. Like, he traded for Quincy Wilson, so like there are things that like they have experience trading these 6th and 5th round picks for veterans. And that's something that I would expect as the market kind of develops. You mentioned CJ Mosley might not be on the team. From the other end, if some veteran, Zach Ertz, I'm looking at the camera and just mentioning Zach Ertz for the 10th time, I don't even know if I'd be really happy with that, but I think like something like that is totally in the cards for Saturday afternoon.
Michael, I like this. I think my favorite aspect of it is something that sort of PJ was touching on, is that I think you really lean towards guys who have upside. So I think that's my favorite aspect of it. Like with Tommy Tremble, can you explore some of what he can do with the ball in his hands, which we didn't see much of or enough of in college. Then in the later half of your draft, you also got some more guys who fit that bill. I think we only have one pick in common between yours, other than Zack Wilson. Only one in common.
That doesn't even count at this point.
So I do like your class. I would give it I'll give it a solid A-. I'm a fan of it.
PJ, what grade would you give it?
Yeah, I would go probably A-. Like, I don't know if I'm necessarily over the moon, just because like the only way I'm over the moon is like if JC Horn or Elijah Vera-Tucker is a Jet. Yeah. But if that doesn't happen, I think you did just about as well as you could have.
All right, Michael, let's hear yours.
Okay, so at number 23, this is the one pick we have in common. I went with Jenkins here. It's a pick that doesn't show up a lot on these simulators, but going through this time, he was there. So I jumped on it. And obviously there are concerns about where are you going to play him. You have Fant there. I like Fant there. He was okay last year, and then I think he should be even better in this scheme where his athleticism is really going to be prioritized. So I do like Fant in that spot, and I would guess Jenkins is probably going to play guard for you to start out. Hopefully you can kick him out once Fant presumably leaves next year, but if he plays well, he might stay. So it is an interesting question of where he'll play, but offensive line, particularly guard, is such a huge need for them. So if Jenkins is there, he's one of the only guys who is a value at this spot. So I would have to take him and just figure all that out later. Get a talented offensive lineman in. He has the measurables that I think you want in this scheme. Across the board, he was great with his vertical and broad jump numbers were really good. And that's something that has been a consistent trait in these wide zone Shanahan linemen. They do really good in those two aspects, and Jenkins does have that. So I do like Jenkins, the potential of playing him at guard to start out. Then round 2, this is another one we talked about earlier in terms of the positional fit. We don't know how it would work out, but Creed Humphrey was here. So I take him at number 34. I don't know if the Jets are actually going to consider him because it doesn't seem like they want to move Connor McGovern over to guard. And like you said, PJ, it seems like center is the place for Creed. So again, I'm not sure if this happens, but just from my perspective, with these 2 picks, just getting offensive line talent in the building, that's what they need.
Is that if you double down that early, you're done. Like you're set on those, and then you can attack everything else for the rest of the weekend, which I don't think
it was tempting for me, but it's like, why didn't they sign Corey Linsley then? It was a perfect scheme fit at center. It seems like they're very set on Connor McGovern.
I think
like George Fant, like a great
Linsley, because you can't just get any free agent you want. He went to the Chargers. Maybe that's more desirable than the Jets.
There are others,
whatever. But there were other centers. There were plenty of other solid guys. David Andrews.
And this is not.
There are plenty of options, and they didn't go for any of them.
on Connor McGovern.
Right.
Like I like him. I think he's fine. Like
especially in this scheme. This is a good scheme for him.
He's going to be better than he was last year, and he wasn't bad last year. Like I'm okay with Connor McGovern playing center next year.
Yeah,
cool.
He's okay at center. It's just the fact is like the guard options, both free agency and the draft, pure guards aren't there. And free agency, you had Tooney, and that was it. Sheriff got tagged. And so there were no options, just pure guard. So to improve the line, the best path was, move McGovern over, get a good center. So that's sort of just what the problem is. But McGovern at center in a vacuum, just that on its own is fine. It's just how are you going to improve guard while keeping him there instead of moving him over?
And it's like we've talked about taking a guy at center, moving out to guard, but even Tevin Jenkins, and there's a lot of other guys. You mentioned Raiden's earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a tackle and they just try to stick him at guard. There are other guys that we aren't even talking about. And I know we're all happy with Fant, but even if like Cosme's there at 34, I think Joe Douglas might consider it. But then it's like,
so that's you can't
play him inside. Cosme, so what do you do with him?
Yeah, Cosme's got no chance to be a guard. He's too tall. It's like 6'7". Like there's no chance. And listen, I like Sam Cosme. He's got the most pass reps of anybody in this class. Texas threw the ball a lot. Texas threw the ball more than any team in the country before he opted out this year. Like Sam Cosme is a good player. I have a end of the first round grade on him. I don't think Sam Cosme's a jet. I don't think Sam Cosme is necessarily a scheme fit. And I definitely don't think Sam Cosme's a guard, which would be
definitely problem. Not. But I'm just saying, I think that you raise a really good point, Michael, that the pure guard talent and free agency in the draft just really hasn't been there. Our picks at Tevin Jenkins and Creed Humphrey are two non-guards that we're projecting to be guards, unless you're going to put McGovern over. So it's just he's in a tough spot. And I'm curious how much they weigh the scheme with guys like Kendrick Green and Wyatt Davis, who specifically Green I actually really like. Davis,
I am begging for Kendrick Green. We're 24 hours out. I'm begging for Kendrick Green.
I think he's the guy. I think he makes a lot of sense because you're going to draft one guard early, and I think you're going to see another one in round 3. And I think Green, if he's there at 66, I think he's the pick.
Yeah, so I start out here double dipping on O-line. We'll see how they distribute these two guys, where they play them, who they move. That's going to be question mark. But you got two athletic guys here who can play in the scheme. They're talented enough for the spots where they're getting selected. So I'm okay with that. Get the talent now, figure out the positions later. Number 66, staying on offense, going with the tight end here, not Tommy Tremble. Going for a little more of a versatile guy who offers both blocking and receiving. I'm going with Pat Freiermuth here. I did want to sort of lean towards the receiving because I like Chris Herndon, but I'm just not going to bank on him after how he played last season.
Right.
He made a couple nice catches the last 3 games of the season, but it doesn't make up for the many, many awful drops and a couple fumbles that he had throughout the season. He was flat out terrible, which was shocking to see because I loved him after his rookie season. Thought he was going to be a top 10 guy, but I'm not banking on him for anything after last season. So I did want to get some receiving talent in the building at tight end. So that's where I go here with number 66. Number 86, finally looking at the defense. Going with Paulson Adebo from Stanford, cornerback. Great playmaker. You mentioned it before, PJ. I mean, 8 interceptions and 27 passes defended in 2 seasons is just absurd.
Like by far the best ball skills out of any corner in this class. Not even close.
So again, some cornerback talent here. And then I'm going back to back with cornerback number 107. PJ, you can probably talk a lot more about him than I could, but I'm going with Trill Williams here, looking to fill the slot role.
Hey, I go to Syracuse too.
That's my guy. So we had Trill on the show probably.
You don't know anything, Ben. No,
Trill. So I asked because Syracuse has had an odd amount of quality outside corners over our 4 years here at this esteemed football powerhouse, Iffy being one of them. Trill played outside as a true freshman, and then they put him in the slot for the last 2 years. And 6'2", 200 does not exist in the slot. Like, that's not something that happens. He is adamant on staying at nickel. Like, he wants to be near the line of scrimmage. He's very good in the run game. I think this is another toy for Saleh that, like, if that ends up happening, this is a versatile guy that could play a little bit of box safety, has ball skills, like is a menace at forcing fumbles, goes for the strip whenever he can, is a big dude. And I think, honestly, if it works out early, is going to kind of start the trend of these bigger slot corners. So, replacing the Brian Poole mold from last year, I would love if Trill ended up being a Jet.
Yeah, I'm a little partial to Trill Williams because he's from Yonkers and same city I was born in. But I'm curious to know your opinion because, you just talked about it a little bit, but with Trill, like you said, 6'2" in the slot just doesn't happen. It's a position for smaller, quicker guys. And he does have some athleticism, but you look at his production throughout his career, and he put up really good numbers in the slot. He covered well in that role. One touchdown,
he's gone up
3 picks
against
throughout his career. So
he's gone up
what do you
against
think about his ability to stick there in the NFL?
Yeah, he's gone up against real good slot receivers too. So he went up against Hunter Renfrow 2 years ago, which, okay, was a very good slot guy and has had a better NFL career than I ever expected at this point. But when you're talking a shifty slot receiver type guy, good. And then he clamped Daz Newsome, who I don't necessarily love, but is a speedy, quicker slot guy. He's a hell of an athlete. He's a built dude. He's big. He's pretty much just a safety playing nickel. Like you said, 6'2", 200. It doesn't really exist. I've watched every game of the career of these 3 Syracuse defensive backs. I do like all 3 of them for different reasons, but Trill in the slot, it's worked. He's played against real competition in the ACC. He's played against ACC players. Like, I honestly, I like his chances. Like, I really do. And I would have liked them more had he got hurt and didn't travel to Clemson this year. But if he had some Amari Rodgers tape from this year, I really would have loved to see him go up against one of my favorite players in this whole class. But like you mentioned, 1 interception, 3 pass breakups from the slot, or 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions, I think it was, from the slot. Like, he doesn't, that is his biggest thing that he told us that he hangs his hat on. His slot numbers are great. He doesn't allow touchdowns. He doesn't allow the big play. And he's a menace. He's a ball hawk. The way Cisco is with interceptions, Trill is very ball aware and knows where the ball is and makes plays on the ball, not necessarily interceptions, but in fumbles more so. And is a dynamic athlete. This is a guy that I'd expect maybe to do some punt returning too as a slot corner. That's how good of an athlete he is.
Yeah, so we'll take Trill. We'll throw him in the slot. And he has the size. If it doesn't work out, try him on the outside.
See, that's the thing. I was going with, until we talked to him and he said he wants to stay at nickel, I'm like, all right, cool. Take this guy and play him outside. We've never seen it. Like, Syracuse has had a really good defensive secondary for some reason. We haven't seen him play outside. Like, go. I think there's potential there. So if it fails inside, which I don't think it will, I'm pretty bullish on Trill. I have him as a top 100 guy. But, I mean, I think the body type at least projects to the outside, if nothing else.
Yeah, so we pick up a slot corner here. Still don't have Brian Poole re-signed. Hopefully they get that done at some point, but until then, it is a need. Javelin Guidry is probably your starting nickel right now, and he showed a little bit last season, but again, you just don't want to rely too much, not base on too much production. It was a small sample, so hopefully it turns to be something, but going to fill the slot here. So going to the second pick of the 5th round, number 146. Finally going to touch on linebacker here. I'm going to go with Monty Rice from Georgia. With the linebackers, I'm mostly trying to look for athleticism, coverage ability. Rice is on the smaller side, but he had a good 40 time, 458, pretty good coverage numbers in his career, only 1 touchdown allowed throughout his time with Georgia. So I think a guy that Saleh could mold at this point, maybe compete for that will spot with Cashman. 8 picks later, 10th pick of the 5th round, number 154. Going to look to the front 7 again. I'm going with, on the edge, I'm going to go with Rashad Weaver from Pittsburgh. Maybe not the toolsiest guy in terms of athleticism. He did have the ACL injury that took away his 2019 season, but the production was there last year. He was tied for 2nd, I think, among edge rushers and pressures per game. So he was productive last season. I'm going to bank on that here. And then number 186, the guy you've already talked a lot about, PJ. He's one of my favorites too. Hopefully the Jets pick him. 2nd pick of the 6th round. I'm going with Jalen Darden here. If he is available at this point, I think if
he's available, I'm doing backflips.
Yeah, absolutely. His elusiveness is incredible. He had the most forced missed tackles after the catch among wide receivers last year. He's only 5'7", 174. So obviously there's a limit on the upside, but when you're breaking tackles like that,
yeah, he's Jakeem.
You're going to make your plays. And there's
Grant.
Punt return upside too. He has plenty of experience in that role and was pretty successful. So you get some special teams upside as well. And I think that's what the Jets are missing, a wide receiver. They have a lot with Davis, Mims, Crowder, and Cole. But one thing that I don't think any of those guys give you is someone you could just throw a screen pass to, hand the ball off to in a jet sweep, and they can make something happen. They don't really have that. And that was important in San Francisco with guys like Samuel and Ayuk, and the Jets don't really have that right now. So I think they are going to go after that type of wide receiver on day 3. Darden, I think, is the best candidate for that role of most of the prospects in this part of the draft. So I would love this pick. And then to close it out, I also went with the kicker like you did, Ben, but a different one. I'm going with McPherson from Florida at number 226. So that rounds out my class.
I like it a lot.
I like it too. I'm in with this class as well. I think a very smart and measured draft class. I still think mine's better. I'm just kidding.
That's fair. I think mine's better.
Yeah, that's fair too. The Pat pick is really interesting because I feel like that is something that, look, they've addressed receiver and free agency. So it's like, PJ, like kind of what you were saying earlier. It's like Mims isn't going anywhere and Corey Davis isn't going anywhere. And you're going to take a slot guy that probably won't play until next year. You'll be a little bit of a gadget guy this year. So it's like, if you want to surround Zach with weapons, tight end is the spot to do it. We know San Francisco loves 12 personnel. There's question marks with Herndon. So I do think it's something that they're definitely going to address. And I think they will address it in round 3. I haven't really thought about taking a guy like that earlier. Tremble's been my guy because I just really like how he would fit with Herndon. I like that you could probably get him at 86. I'm curious to get PJ's thought because I don't think we really talked about it. But Pat Freiermuth at 66, I believe it was. How would you react to that, PJ?
If he gets there, I'm in. Like I think Pat Freiermuth and Brevin Jordan they both have second round grades for me. Brevin Jordan is pretty much Chris Herndon light, right? Like it was great out of the slot this year as just another Miami uber athletic tight end. Pat Freiermuth is your Big Ten tight end. He's good at blocking. He's good in line. He, is a plus blocker. And he was the focal point of Penn State's offense 2 years ago. Was banged up this year, didn't play a lot, but they ran that offense through a tight end on a pretty good team 2 years ago. So when you're looking at something like that, I think he's a high upside guy. I'd be really surprised if he got to 66, but if he does, that's when I start thinking about Tommy Tremble. I have Tommy Tremble at 69 on my board. So listen, I think that's an overdraft. I think I'm way too high on Tommy Tremble just because I love him as a player. But that's when I'd start thinking about kind of a tight end. And if Pat Freiermuth's there, Pat Freiermuth's a top 45 guy for me. So rip it at 66.
And Michael, did you take a running back or did I miss something?
I did not take a running back.
So you are confident.
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine, but you're confident that, I guess the only issue I have is I think the Jets are going to try to be a ground and pound smash mouth.
I mean, I just think with that, because I love taking shots on late round running backs. We see the stars emerge all the time. It's one of the easiest positions they hit on later in the draft. But I think it's just, I do like this group. I like this group. I think Johnson and Adams it was a small sample, but they showed a lot of potential last season. Pirine, I don't love, but he's a rookie. He didn't get too many touches. Let's see what he has. And then I think Coleman gives you a lot in the passing game. But I mean, frankly, this is probably one of the worst running back groups in the league. But definitely. It's if you focus on you always got to focus on the offensive line first. We picked 2 linemen here. Yeah. We got another weapon at tight end. They did plenty wide receiver. Running back for me is just in general in this sport the least important position on offense or defense. So for me, I still wanted to, we focused on offense early. So I wanted to go back to back with cornerback, make sure we got some help there because they're extremely thin at that position. I wanted to touch on linebacker. I'm pretty big on getting another edge. I know it's a 5th round, so it's not like a huge investment, but I like Weaver. I do want to get some more talent at edge, even though they have plenty of it. Let's just load up. Let's build the best pass rush in the league. Let's try to do that. So that was important for me as well. You could argue, I think, at 154 is where I went with Weaver in the 5th round. You can go for a running back there, right? But it is the 5th round. So at the end of the day, this guy's probably not doing anything for you. So I could totally see you throwing running back into this class. But for me, I was pretty happy with the value I got the rest of these positions. And I don't see it as a necessity to where you need a running back even later in the draft.
Yeah, the Jets just have so many holes and too many holes to be taking a running back at like we talked about earlier at 34. But I will say, if the Jets draft some generational talent, I mean, it's the draft and it's hard to predict, and you could get really good players on day 3. But if they were to take a Najee Harris at 34, like I think it would be okay.
I don't know. I don't think
Hold on. No, you didn't. Okay. If they take a guy like that at 34, it's like I'm a little disappointed because I think in an ideal world there's a smarter way to draft players, but at the same time, it's like I don't think the Raiders are upset they took Josh Jacobs. I don't think the Browns are upset they took Nick Chubb. If you're getting a good player, I still think you're happy. I think it comes more down to the offensive line. So if that is something that they're going to consider, PJ mentioned that they might consider ETN at 34. It's like, well, you better damn make sure you get an offensive lineman at 23 and probably at 66 as well. Because if you're taking a running back, you're signaling to the world, we're going to play some smash mouth football and we're going to run play action with Zack Wilson. But I agree with you. I wouldn't address it until day 3. I still would address it. I just wouldn't leave it naked. But overall, I'd probably give this draft a B or a B plus even. I think you did a nice job. PJ, the moment we've all been waiting for. 1, your reaction to Grades Michaels, and then 2, your mock draft.
I think Michael did again. That was a very good, a lot of value there. I don't think you necessarily need a running back. I agree with you. You double down with pass rush with Weaver and just trying to get more guys in there and getting guys into the system. And if it hits kind of thing, just throwing darts, especially on day 3. But the first couple of picks, and Paulson Debo, especially at where you got him, totally in. Like, I think this is another A minus type thing. I think it's very hard. There's so many scheme fits across the board here, and there are so many specific players that I love for this team, and you both took a bunch of them, where it's like, I'm happy. Again, like I said, the only way I'm giving an A, and it's pretty much a blanket A, if J.C. Horner or Elijah Vera-Tucker ends up on this team from 23 or wherever you're moving up to get them, great. That's like
even if they take a running back,
those 2 guys is.
Even if they take a running back right after that?
Yeah.
Is it still an A?
That might suck.
You're not going to convince us, Ben. We don't want
I'm
a running back.
not saying they should. I'm not saying they should, but
right.
somebody has to play devil's advocate. I mean, look, I'm not saying they should.
Somebody does have to play devil's advocate.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah, that
makes some sense.
That might bring me down a little bit.
Right,
it would make some sense.
Let's
I think maybe this floated ATN thing is maybe like, oh, the Bills, hey, trade up, guys, and take a running back, because apparently that's what they want to do. Is they might make a move for ETN at 30 or move up from 30 even. So maybe we're floating that out there to get a division rival.
All right, PJ, let's hear it. Let's hear the long-awaited mock draft.
So I went some different ways than you guys, just because we've touched on a lot of the same players. So I wanted to go kind of a different way. I didn't want to start Wilson Tevin. So I started Wilson Newsome. Which I think Greg Newsome, again, it might be the best pure zone corner in this class, and that would be a great scheme fit for the Jets. Real injury concerns, I get it, but had a great year this year, a good 2019, a great year in 6 games this year for Northwestern that ran a pro-style defense, has man experience and zone experience, was really, really good in zone, was really, really good. He got hurt against Ohio State, but the 17 snaps he did have were good. Played up to the competition, just an all-around good player. I think the biggest knock on him is the durability, the injury concerns. Right. But if the Jets ended up getting him at 23 and didn't have to move up for him, I'm in. So at 34, I didn't take an offensive lineman in the first round. I took corner, so I went the other way. I took Dylan Raiden, who I think you move him inside this year and then throw him out to right tackle next year. This is a guy that has a lot of upside, was very, very good for an FCS team in North Dakota State. I think he's going to be a very good guard. It's just a matter of, can he play tackle? He beefed up a little bit. He's over 300 pounds now, which I think is important. He's got good arms. He's got good hand placement. It's just the tape, he never necessarily dominated, which is something I would have liked to see, especially against lower competition.
How do you feel he fits a guard in this team?
Yeah, so I think he's a scheme fit in that, like, the thing is when you're moving these tackles inside. So I didn't want to take Kendrick Green because you did, and we've hit on him a lot. So I tried to go in a different direction, and that is my guy for this team, especially on the interior. I do think he's an athlete. I do think if he gets into an NFL strength program, he'll put on that weight and be better. But especially with any of these tackles that you're moving inside, you're hoping it's just for 1 year. And I do think he'll be able to hold his own before fleshing back out to right next year. So I think, I think he's going to be fine. I think Dylan Raiden's a very good NFL player. For that matter, another guy that I probably could have gotten later and will go later than 34 is Jackson Carman from Clemson, who is another big body tackle who keeps saying, I want to be a tackle. I want to be a tackle. I want to be a tackle, but I think is going to be a very, very good guard if that's what he ends up doing. I don't know if he's necessarily a scheme fit for this team, but that's another guy that it has tackle guard flexibility. And a lot of these tackles people think are going to kick inside. Raiden's might be one of them because he's a bit undersized on the weight outcome, which I think is easier to hide at right tackle anyway. So we'll go Raiden's. 66. I took Tommy Tremble. I wanted to get him. That's pretty much it. Like I probably overdrafted him again. I have him at 69 on my board, take him at 66. I feel like a lot of people would be surprised he goes that early, but I wanted this guy. I think he is like one of the most perfect scheme fits for this team. I think Tommy Tremble, like in my dream world, is absolutely a Jet. So I jumped on the chance to get him. I didn't want to wait 20 picks and see what happens. Then at 86, we got another one of my favorite players, Hamza Nasruddin from Florida State, who's a safety. Team isn't exactly deep on the back half. Marcus is what he is. You don't know if he's going to be here next year. I don't know if Hamza Nasruddin is a safety. I actually like him more at will. I think he's going to be a very good linebacker. This is a guy that is just an absolute thumper, a huge dude, had great tape before he tore his ACL in 2019, and then only played 2 games this year. Kind of got roughed up at the Senior Bowl in man coverage. These Senior Bowl drills are really hard for the DB to win because they're designed for the wide receiver. They're just one-on-one coverage downfield. And when you're kind of this at the very least safety, if not safety tweener linebacker thing, it's hard to win downfield against real wide receivers. And Hamza kind of got quote unquote exposed in that.
That's an interesting fit too, because you remember they were in the running for Keanu Neal in free agency.
Exactly. That is where I think this comes in, is that if you want that tweener kind of safety type will, Hamza Nasruddin is that guy in this class.
And it gives you flexibility, because I'm not necessarily sold on Ashton Davis as a strong safety. I mean, I know they brought in Joyner, but I think the type of linebacker they're going to target is going to be a guy who you might have the flexibility to play box safety, but you can also have him as your starting will.
Yeah, so that's why I went with Hamza. Then 107, Deyo Dengbo from Vanderbilt, one of my favorite players in this class, another edge rusher, another toolsy guy, 6'6", long, crazy long arms from Vandy. When you think Vandy, you don't necessarily think, top tier NFL talent, but this is a guy I love. Tore his Achilles training for the Senior Bowl, so we don't know when he's going to be back. He thinks he's going to be ready for camp is what, kind of he's going to play this year is the plan, at least the last that I've read. But this is a very, very toolsy guy that I think next to Carl Lawson, kind of like a Zuniga, another developmental, except I do think he's better than Jabari Zuniga, and he's only going to fall this far. He's a top 50 guy if he doesn't get hurt. And I think the injury question about when is this guy going to play is going to push him down the board. I think at 107, he's an absolute steal given how good of a player he is. So go grab him. 146, Anthony Schwartz, not going to harp on it. Just want him. Just a fast guy. Need him. Great. Fantastic. See him next year when Jameson Crowder's gone. 154, I did take Chuba Hubbard. I don't know. I do think that this running back group is not great. I don't think running back is necessarily a thing you have to do, but I do think Chuba Hubbard is a scheme fit, especially if you're drafting Tevin Jenkins. If you think Tevin Jenkins is a scheme fit, by that logic, you also should probably want Chuba Hubbard. I'm not the biggest Chuba Hubbard guy, but I do think if he improves as a receiver, he's going to be a good back in the league. He's going to use that Olympic track caliber speed. I went Olympic track star back-to-back here with Schwartz and Hubbard. Then 186, I took Sedarius Hutcherson from South Carolina, another guard. I didn't take Kendrick Green, so I just wanted another big body, adding depth to the offensive line. Him and Cam Clark is developmental interior kind of guys. Sedarius Hutcherson is huge. I don't know if he's necessarily a scheme fit, but on the simulator, at least the guard depth wasn't exactly in the spot that I wanted it to be this late, but I do like him as a player, so I'll throw the dart on him. And then 226, you two both took kickers, so I took another just pass rush specialist, and Chris Rumpf from Duke, pure pass rush specialist. This is a guy who's an NFL coach. I believe his father is the outside linebackers coach for the Bears now. Was the best edge rusher, returning edge rusher in the country this year. His production numbers in 2019, his pressures, his sacks was awesome. Problem is he only weighs 225 pounds. You don't know how that's necessarily going to play on the edge in the NFL, which is why he's a guy with his numbers is going to get pushed down the board to a spot where you could take him at 226, but beef him up a little bit, get him into spots. I think this is just your situational pass rusher. He has an affinity for getting after the quarterback. And if you're taking him at 226, you don't really need him to do much else.
I think out of the 3 mock drafts, this is probably the most realistic to what I think Joe Douglas
I tried to keep it, a little bit within reason. I took guys that I think he might target. I think Raiden's is a guy I actually do think he's not going to shy away from. He didn't shy away from Mekhi Becton and a lot of the concerns that people had against him last year. I don't think he's going to shy away from taking an FCS guy like Dylan Raiden's either.
That was the pick I spent the longest time on, was 34, because I had the choice between taking a corner or going with Raiden's. Ultimately I went with the corner. But yeah, I think the Nasruddin pick is a really interesting one. I think that's a good example of exactly what they did with Ashton Davis, even if you think he can play linebacker. But like you said, they're in the business of getting good football players. And I think Michael and I drafted a little bit too much towards need, potentially, as compared to what I think Joe Douglas will do. I think he's going to go in with the lens of trying to get some positions, but he's going to go and add the best players on his board and not be too worried about it. I think Michael and I both doubled up on offensive line fairly early on in the draft, and you were a little bit different there, which also would make sense if you look at how San Francisco valued guards. You take a guy like Raiden, you stick him in a guard year one, you probably bump him out after Fant leaves, but not addressing offensive line till later is something that I'm not crazy about. But
neither am I. I wanted to stay a little bit different. Yeah, I want to say a little bit different from the two of you. Again, like I am totally not against doubling down if it's corner in the first round, taking a Raiden's type guy and then taking Kendrick Green at 66. Cool, awesome. I'm in. Listen, doubling down at offensive line with two guys that are going to start for you in year one. There are way worse plans when you have a rookie quarterback than doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of this class too. Like it's more realistic than ours in the sense that I really think in general, like as fans, when we make these mock drafts, we're sort of going like need, like trying to check every single box, but it usually just doesn't play out that way. You know, like we saw the Ashton Davis pick last year. Like you always see these picks that are, you know, like the Jets aren't going to take a defensive tackle on day one or day two, probably not even day three this year.
Hey, I did see a mock that had Barmore going to the Jets at 23.
All right, that was probably clickbait. I saw that. But the Jets probably aren't going to do that. But you always see teams bypass need a little bit if there's a guy who they really like at a position that might not be the hugest need,
especially if you're not in a position to win.
Right, exactly. So I do like PJ's mock quite a bit. I knew some in round one. I think is a great scheme fit. I would love that pick. I really like a lot of the options at 23. Newsome's one of my favorite. Rumph is a pick that I really, really like. A lot of pass rush upside at the end of the draft. And Tremble too. PJ has me sold on his. I'm on his train now. So I'm going to be rooting for the Tommy Tremble pick. That would be. I think he is a great scheme fit, and also just the untapped upside as a receiver aspect of it is exciting too. So I'm not going to be one to criticize PJ's mock. I'll give him a solid A.
Yeah, I would give him an A-. I think this is a good. The only thing I'm uncomfortable about is the offensive line.
The offensive line, which I understand. Like again, like when you're looking at that middle tier offensive line, like Kendrick Green, we've said that a lot. Ben Cleveland, I think, is an interesting guy from Georgia that they're going to take a look at. I don't necessarily know where he goes. I have an early 3 on him. Could be a 66 guy. I might ended up. I didn't have this on my final board, but because I kept it kind of general. But Kendrick Green, I feel like is a better fit for the Jets. But if they went Ben Cleveland, go Ben Cleveland. Like there are options. I just wanted to primarily at 66, where was the other spot where I could have taken a guard. I wanted Tommy Tremble, and I wanted to get that, and I wanted to lock that up before anybody else could.
Yeah, you probably could have gone with Green or Cleveland or something and then taken Tremble at 86. But I like it. I think it's like if you like a player that much, you don't play the game of waiting and seeing if he's going to.
And that's something that I don't think Joe Douglas is going to do. If he has a guy, I don't think he cares about what anybody's going to think. I think he's going to go after it.
I think it's just this is a very realistic expectation because I think a lot of Jets fans are on board with the Jets doubling up at all line, but I don't think Joe Douglas is going to feel the pressure to just take an offensive lineman to take an offensive lineman.
Like we've said, if he thought the offensive line was really a problem, he would have signed one of these guys.
Right.
And he didn't.
Right.
So I think he'll draft one early, but I don't know if he thinks it's that big of a deal once you have one already in the stable at 23 or 30.
I think the flip side of that argument is he wants a youth movement on the offensive line, but I agree. I think that he expects with better coaching and another year together that this offensive line will be better and it's not as in dire state that we think it is. So I don't think he's just going to take 2 offensive linemen to take 2 offensive linemen. So I think this is a really realistic and well thought out mock. I think you took the best player on your board. I think most of these guys are really good scheme fits. If this was the Jets draft, again, I'd be very happy. I think Newsome falling to 23. I want to surround Zack Wilson with as much offensive talent as possible, but I really believe in Newsome, and I think he'd be great in this solid system as well. So that'll do it for our mock drafts. I guess we'll tweet out a graphic of them, but tweet us who you think had the best mock draft. PJ,
well, clearly I had the worst because the only one that got anything less than the A range was you giving me a B.
That's just because you said I don't know anything. That's just because you said I don't know anything. So I just had to tank your grade. But PJ, before we let you go, I want your final prediction for day one. Obviously we have the mock, but your prediction of, I guess, what happens for the Jets, but with other teams. How do you think that this night goes?
I think it's going to be crazy, especially with the quarterbacks at the top. I don't know. I think Atlanta right now, gun to my head, I think they stay and take Pitts, which I think is a massive mistake for them. But yeah, I would either trade out or take a Trey Lance if he gets past San Francisco. But I think it's going to be crazy. I don't know. I don't think the Teddy Bridgewater trade should change Denver's philosophy in getting a quarterback. I don't know if Sam Darnold should change Carolina's philosophy in getting a quarterback if Fields gets there. I am very scared right now of New England making a play for Justin Fields.
They're getting a quarterback.
Yeah, that would be my worst fear in the world.
I have a
right
devil's
now.
advocate argument there. I know everyone's been saying that about Fields in New England, but I feel like I need to see a little bit more from Bill post Brady before I'm afraid of what he does with someone else. That's just me. Maybe I'm underestimating him.
I don't think
it's fair.
Yeah, I think you're massively underestimating who is probably the best NFL coach of all time. Like, look, even the year where Brady went down and they still had a good roster, he went 11-5 with Matt Castle. I think they're gonna go get their rookie quarterback this year. I hope it's Mac Jones. I fear it's going to be Lance or Fields because I think both those guys are going to have success. Yeah, I think Atlanta should just take a quarterback because it's like, do you really think you're going to win a Super Bowl with Matt Ryan at this point? I think it's like this. You're probably not going to be in a position like this again unless you bottom out with Matt Ryan and Arthur Smith to take a quarterback at the top end of the draft, a quarterback like a Fields or a Lance that's this good. So it's like, I think you take him, you can sit him for an entire year and still kind of build it up. But I think that's an example of just needing to know your long-term needs and not just drafting for the short term. You're picking fourth. Don't take Pitts and try to get an extra 5 years out of Matt Ryan. I think it's okay to go take a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance. Yeah, I think New England ultimately gets the quarterback, which is
I think it's going to be a crazy night, especially off the first off. I think a really interesting kind of way to look at it is what is happening with the edges, because none of them are particularly good. And where does Jalen Phillips, the most talented one with a lot of questions, end up going? Where does Barmore end up going? Because the interior line class is not great either. How many guards, like, do any true guards go in the first round? Does somebody take a Wyatt Davis still for some reason? I think what is the fifth cornerback situation if there's 5 in the first round? Where does Farley go? There are a lot of questions, and I feel like with no pro days and no ability to get guys into buildings, I've been on record. I think this might be the most risk-averse draft ever. And when you have the extra ammo like the Jets do, right now I think the Jets move up tomorrow night. Yeah, for who? I don't know. But I do think the Jets are going to move up. That's my hot take.
I think there's going to be a run on offensive lineman, and I think that's going to prompt JD to move up a few spots. I think he's going to move up, 5 spots or so and just secure that offensive lineman. Because it shouldn't, but I do think the Super Bowl has a big impact. And I just feel like the league is at a state right now where more teams are beginning to value the offensive line again. And I just think that there's a lot of teams in front of the Jets that could use either an offensive lineman or a corner. I think Farley's falling a lot. I think Newsome has some injury concerns as well. But after him, it's like, well, if you're not getting the corner, you're going to take the offensive line. There's just a lot of teams in front of the Jets that are in a similar situation for what the Jets are looking for. So I agree. I think the Jets ultimately trade up. Michael, any last prediction before we get out of here?
I think I would just say for the Jets, the storyline I'm most interested in is if they're unable to get an offensive lineman in the first round, whether they don't trade up or they stay put and someone they like doesn't fall, how aggressive are they enforcing that in round 2? Are they going to try and trade up to get to the bottom of the first round if they think that's a better value? Are they going to reach for an offensive lineman at 34? If they don't do that, are they really going to come out 23 and 34 not taking one? Then where do they go from there? So they're in a really interesting spot with having such a huge need at offensive line, but there's not really much alignment with value at where they are in the late first round and the early second, especially with just pure guards. So I'm really interested to see how they handle that position with it being such a huge need.
Yeah, I think if they can trade up at 23 without giving up 34, so maybe they give up, 66 and 107 or something, or 140, whatever it is, or a future pick, then I think you're looking at, you trade up at 23, but then you trade down at 34, because day 2 is where the meat of this draft is. And like most drafts, but this draft in particular, I think the Jets are going to try to have as many picks, as many lottery tickets as possible. PJ, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Plug all your stuff. We were just talking about earlier, you have a terrific podcast, the Boomer Bust podcast. Just tell our listeners where they can find it if they're not listening already, and where they can find all your work.
Of course. Thank you for having me. First of all, this was an absolute blast. I got to talk about the Jets, so that's all I really care about anyway. But Boomer Bust the Draft Show on YouTube. We're going to be live for all 3 days of the draft, starting at 7:30 tonight when you're listening to this for the first round, 6:30 on Friday, and 11:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. We're going to have, reaction analysis of all 259 picks. Boomer Bust Draft on Twitter, Instagram. I believe we're on TikTok too. That's Max's new thing. So at Boomer
Michael,
Bust
we got to
Draft,
get on TikTok. Come on.
That's your thing. You can do that.
Boomer Bust the Draft Show on YouTube. We're on all Boomer Bust the Draft Show on all podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So really appreciate you guys having me, boys. If anybody wants to follow me for a lot of dumb Jets tweets, at the real PJ Clark on Twitter, I'll throw myself on there right now. But dude, this was an absolute blast. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, nearly 2 hours just breaking down everything that's going to happen tonight. I have to say, Boomer Bust does a really good job with their merch, because I can spot you guys on campus a mile away because I just see that hoodie or the beanie. I mean,
it's the hoodie, man.
It's the hood. Honestly, I might have to buy one. I think everybody should just start wearing the Boomer Bust. It looks good, so check out their shop as well. As far as our podcast goes, Michael and I, just like last year, we'll have podcasts out every night of that draft, recapping what happened and then previewing the next day. So we're very excited to bring you some draft content. You can follow us at CYJPod on Twitter. You can follow myself at Ben W. Blessington, Michael_Nania. Find us podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Jets X Factor, which is the best place to go for Jets content. A big night tonight. Hopefully drafting the next savior of this franchise, which is obviously exciting, but I'm very interested to see what they do at 23. But remember, folks, no matter what happens tonight, don't forget, do not let the New York Jets ruin your life.
Pass the work quickly. Down to 6 seconds. Carr going down again. And it's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
For the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. Under the beat, and the punter brings him down. Raiden man saved a touchdown, most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.